that is complete. Let me bring this on over.
Hold on, let me turn my Christmas lights out. There's like half of them more, half of them out anyway.
Okay. All right. All right. Well, good evening. Welcome and thank you to the Power. Welcome to the Power and Forgiveness Men's Group. We have a very special guest this week, Pastor Alvin Georges. As always, I'm joined by my co-facilitator, Minister Robert Cooper. Appreciate you both for being here. Hope you had a wonderful Christmas, as the Scott family did. Hope you had a chance to kick up your feet just a little bit and relax, or at least take pleasure in watching your kids and your family and just reconnecting and all those kinds of things that we're supposed to do. So thank you for taking your time to be here on this evening. It is greatly appreciated. So
Thank
Pastor
you.
Alvin, before we just jump into conversation, I want to give you a little bit of background and summary on what we've been discussing in our group. And I'll start with the objectives. Our goals with the Power of Forgiveness group has been just to introduce offense as a choice. And then to take forgiveness and shift perspectives on it from being a sign of weakness more into one of our key strengths. So in that teaching, what we've kind of taught is that offense can be a gateway to our downfall. If we decide to pick up offense, it can lead to all kinds of things, especially if we don't correct the offense that we've taken. And then we are teaching that forgiveness is a critical component of love, and that we receive forgiveness in equal to measure to the forgiveness that we actually give. Obviously, that's a critical component of the Lord's Prayer. And we have gone over that where we talk about forgive these trespassers as those, or forgive those trespass against us as we forgive those, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's been, we try to keep it basic so that everybody can just kind of grab hold into the concept and we don't have to take it and give a whole lot of extra context to it, okay? But we've also introduced that forgiveness is a process, and it's a process in which we have to take necessary steps to cleanse our hearts. And that forgiveness is really something that it's not a verbal thing. It's not just an act where you walk up to someone and you make sure they understand that you are forgiving them so that that process is done. But it's actually the process of making sure that any offense that we've locked into our hearts is actually cleared, so that when we see that person or we think about that event, that we no longer feel the pain or the offense of that moment, but we've been able to clean our hearts and actually move on from that in a spirit of love and compassion. And so one of the things we talked about with the men is just how much strength is actually required to do that, to walk those steps. And those are just steps of discipleship. Pastor LJ joined us last week. And you know, LJ always manages to come with those very interesting perspectives. I think one of my key takeaways from having Pastor LJ was the differences that we can all take and as we deal with offense. Pastor LJ is one of the most laid back people I've ever met and spent time with. I happen to live on the opposite end of the spectrum. But what Pastor LJ was sharing with us is that he rarely takes offense. That's not
And
his
that's the
thing.
truth.
Right. And that is the truth. And I know that to be true for him.
Yes.
And I asked him about his decision-making process, and he's like, well, it's like, really, I just have always known that some people just not going to accept me, and that's okay. If they don't accept me, you know, I just take it or leave it as that and just choose to move on. I don't really spend a whole lot of time there. One of the things he pointed out is he's taken more offense on behalf of those he loves or is close to than he's ever taken for himself. And so I just think that lent our group quite a bit of perspective in terms of, you know, some people don't take up offense very easily. You know, when it comes and it's laid at their feet, it's easy for them to walk away from it. Others of us, you know, we got hair triggers when it comes to offense. And I thanked him for just illustrating there were just multiple degrees of offensiveness. And it's good to know where you fall on that sliding scale, just so you can know how to adjust accordingly. So for today, Mr. Robert and I just want to jump in and have a conversation with you about offense and forgiveness, and to gather some of your insights and perspectives. Mr. Robert.
All right. So yeah, thank you, Jason. You know, we've discussed a lot of things over this past 2 weeks where we've been going through this power of forgiveness. And one of the things that we dealt with was just where that power resides when it comes to forgiveness, because a lot of times the weight of forgiveness, we try to put that on the individual who has offended us. But the truth of the matter is, when we're dealing with forgiveness, the power of that is really in us. So my first question to you is, whenever you hear the power of forgiveness, what do you think that power is? What is that, what is the driving force behind the power of forgiveness, in your opinion?
Mm. Well, first of all, let me formally just thank y'all, brothers, for coming up here. I'm really elated to be a guest up here with you all. So appreciate the time. So I hope something will stick. And I'm coming, I guess, from the same way about how you just said, just from my heart, just from my experience, not trying to be super deep. But the power of forgiveness, when I hear about power, I think it goes back to what Brother Jason was saying, how that's hard to do in and of ourselves. Offense for many, like myself, weakens you. It's a blow. And so to really overcome it, you have to rely on some reinforcement, some auxiliary power, because you don't have it in yourself. A lot of us aren't wired to manage offense. And so we need to take on a spirit other than ourselves. And there is a power that is given to us when we're weak. God says, my strength is made perfect. And I think that becomes the skill that we need to develop, is receiving his power, so that it's not our words, it's not our actions responding to the offense, but it's us receiving his power to deal with and to heal from and overcome the challenge of offense.
That is so good. Especially, when I think about the fact that, trying to work through forgiveness is something that many of us try to do independently. And we forget about the fact that God's power is there to kind of help push us and give us the strength and the courage to do that. So that's great insight.
Absolutely. And I'm sorry, but what do you, it's all right. I just want to jump in a little bit, because
Please do.
People realize, man, we have been raised with certain ways of doing things. And so we will always rely on our habits of handling offense. And, we got ways that we will implement that, like you said, Brother Jason and Brother Robert, you touched on, that will be damaging to us in the end. It's more damaging to us than we're doing to them. Yeah, you said the words, you put it together. It was creative. It sounded elaborate, and you can walk away. But at the end of the day, you can catch a charge for it. You know what I mean? You can lose your job over it. So all of these consequences. But there is a power other than ourselves. Wisdom is power. Peace is power. Being able to hold yourself when you want to lash out, that's power. When God says, nope, don't say anything, you are exercising power. It takes power to not say something. It takes power to not knock somebody out. As contrast to sometimes when you lose it and become physical, you're showing weakness. So that's what I mean by, just channeling and taking on power other than yourself so that you can get victory over it. Okay, I just had to.
That's all great stuff. That's all great stuff. We've talked on and we've touched on the socialization that a lot of us receive. And that socialization, it goes deep, however we were socialized, wherever you will come from. I mean, generally in the United States, it's all the same for us, or it looks similar, right? We grow up and we are told not to take a lot of flack, don't take a whole bunch of stuff. And other circles, you're told, stay quiet, keep it tight, just move on through. And a lot of that we were taught in our youth, doesn't apply to the discipleship walk that we're all trying to walk.
Right.
And you have to go back and learn how to, I need to reject some of that now. And as I try to mature, because that's no longer the decision-making matrix I need to apply.
Right.
And I don't know it needs to be, reliant on my own judgment, which is the point you just made. It's certainly not our own strength.
Well, to build on that. Well, to build, because I got to, make sure we clarify, because brothers, there's a time and place for everything. Wisdom is power. And so there is a time, we're not just saying there are times where you just restrain yourself. I know you weren't saying that, Brother Jason, because there are times where God would say, okay, yeah, you got to speak up on that. You got to step to that. But even that, it starts with wisdom. I think that's the power that, I was going around the bush, but that's where it starts. It's receiving direction. I remember when we were going through the whole protest, and we're still doing it now, but it was real heightened around the summertime, and everybody wanted to take to the streets. And of course, other people wanted to do more than that. And the reality is, when your emotions get flared up, you want to move, but the first step is wisdom. That's where you get your power. It's not just acting, it's strategic action. What can you do to, conquer this effectively? And that's where the true power is implemented. When you can affect, there are times where God says, no, don't say nothing. Hold your peace. But there are also times where he says, all right, let's go up at once. Let's go to Pharaoh and tell him, let my people go.
Great analogy. Love all of that. And it makes me think about my next question for you. With the holiday season, nearing its end, what type of advice can you offer people when it comes to having to share space with someone who maybe has offended you? And I say that because, well, obviously it's slightly different context because it's pandemic and not everybody went home, but how do you navigate in the space where home is also the environment that triggers you?
Man, y'all could probably speak on that better. That's hard. That's hard. I mean, you in the physical presence of somebody that caused you offense. And so you want to know how we manage this. And usually the holidays are people who are called family, people who act like they're close to you. So that's even harder, man. You got history with folk that ain't paid you money back, ain't give you an apology yet. Man, you have to really, first of all, once again, wisdom. You have to know and prepare yourself for what you're about to get into. There's a meme that I see during the holidays where the person calls and says, who are there? I'm coming over, but first tell me, give me the roster. Who's over there? Because I need to know how to prepare myself for when I show up. And when you show up, make sure you prepare, and part of preparation, so I don't sound rambling, part of preparation is knowing the other person. Knowing the person that's offending you, that they aren't going to magically change and become this angel. So you're walking into somebody that has offended you, and what Maya Angelou tells us, when someone shows you who they are, believe them. So you have to go in there believing them. Yes, they got a rude mouth. They don't know how to say thank you, whatever it is that's their nature. And so you have to be prepared for that. And then, I tell people all the time, plan your exit strategy. Even, if I just got to come and say hi to everybody, because that's all I can tolerate today. Y'all, I see y'all next holiday. I just got a lot going on. So preparation, man.
I think that, and that was fantastic, sir. I think it also speaks to healthy boundaries. I mean, that's part of that wisdom that you speak to. We have to know what type of boundaries to put between ourselves and those who are capable of hurting us, those who desire to hurt us. And we still have to, in times, engage them. And that's part of that wisdom and knowing who's who. Bishop has talked about circles and and putting people in certain circles, and you have to know which circles people need to be put in. It's like containers, so that you understand what can I talk to them about, what is safe. And you have to learn how to do that without building walls, because we talk about constructing walls isn't healthy either, because walls, while they're designed to keep people out, they also force you to stay in, unfortunately. And so it is having that wisdom to know what's healthy and a good boundary, so that you can put people in those buckets. But I'm gonna have to start planning better escape strategies, exit strategies.
You gotta get your exit plan.
I'm gonna have to start packing my little parachutes and tunnels in advance.
Hey, have somebody call you 20 minutes in.
Like, just get ready to say,
man. And we can all automate that with our iPhones now. I mean, that ain't nothing but a thing. I got to get with it.
One of the things that I share with the guys the last time we met was that sometimes whenever you're, approaching reconciliation, that an intermediary is required. And so I use the story of Peter whenever he cut off the soldier's ear, because, the soldier ain't about, he wouldn't be trying to hear no apology from Peter,
Right.
but it takes an intermediary like Jesus to come in and bring about a resolution and a form, reconciliation. So certainly, when I think about going into those spaces, absolutely have an exit strategy. But if your goal is to address an issue, have an intermediary, especially whenever the wound is deep. Especially when the wound is deep.
I love it.
Next
I love
question for you. Men are notorious for not communicating, thoughts or feelings. So, in your opinion, how does this reality hinder our ability, to gain some reconciliation? Because I'm offended, but I just ain't told you, and I'm just sitting here sitting in it. Every time I see you, I get hotter and hotter.
Yeah, you're right. And brothers, we don't, and sometimes it is a gift, because, we don't become snappy over everything. There's a lot that we can let go, but you're right. There's a lot that we hold in as well. And the communication piece, I would encourage brothers. I know one of our first responses is to go into our cave, and that's good as long as you're processing. You're not, hiding from what you need to deal with, because when I go back again, your first step should be gaining wisdom. So there are times, and my dad used to always tell me that, compose yourself, think through it first. He says a wise man always looks ahead. So there's this process. And so that I'd say first, it may be good that you don't communicate first, especially when something that requires some, strategy on how to resolve. You see what I'm saying? So, but there is time where you have to communicate. I think 90%, the majority of offenses that I've experienced requires me having to talk through it. But once again, I think brothers need to learn how to talk, man. How we converse is important for even relating. And so now if I have to reconcile with somebody, conversation is that much. Dialogue, man, there is so many idioms and tones and stuff that we don't realize goes on when we talk, and wording and things of that nature. And, just to be transparent, I had to actually go through counseling myself and realize I don't know how to converse and to express my feelings. I mean, my vocabulary on the emotional, my emotional vocabulary was very limited. So how in the world can I express myself if I don't even know what I'm feeling? How do I connect this word with this feeling? And then how do I say it in a way that I don't add on to the conflict? I mean, we learn, our trades, we learn, what we went to school for with our degrees, but we don't do enough learning how to communicate how we feel. And that takes some learning. It really does.
So, I can't help it. I live with Dr. SOS. So, the IQ versus EQ, is something that pops up in our conversation all the time, because I find that my emotional intelligence can be severely lacking. All right. And that's frustrating for me, because conceptually, I feel like I ought to be able to wrap my brain around this thing so that I can connect my feelings with words and communicate them. It goes back to that socialization piece, though. I wasn't socialized to talk about my feelings a lot. There was either, I love you. That was passed around quite a bit, and that was fine. But beyond that spectrum, it wasn't a whole lot. I didn't see my parents argue. And so I didn't see the reconciliation process either, because I didn't see them argue. You can kind of get the vibe, but if it wasn't flat out, you saw it, then they ain't got to discuss it with you. Right. So as men now, we come along, we've gotten older. Well, my relationship with my dad now is very precious to me. I seek his wisdom. I seek his guidance, and I make sure that I tell him regularly that I love you, and I hug him, because we have to have that, because I know one day it's going to be gone. I know that you lost your father, Pastor Alvin, and sooner or later that's going to happen to me as well.
Yeah.
And, so I learn when I watch brothers like yourself and you go through that loss, you know what, I need to call my dad today and let him know that he's cherished and communicate to him, at once upon a time, there's a lot of things I had to clean up, right?
Mhm.
Because
Mhm.
messiness.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so, just to make sure there wasn't any offense, you got to go clean that up. And it wasn't hard. It wasn't pretty. Yeah. But we have to learn how to
Mhm.
do it. Every man
Yeah.
has to.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I check in
I
with
mean,
my
that's
kids now just to make sure, hey, look, this
yeah.
is how you do that.
Right.
And if you ever have a problem with me, I want you to discuss it. It may be
Right.
awkward, but let's put it on
Right.
the table.
Yeah. Yeah. And I really want to stress learn it and just practically how do you learn communication, counseling, read books up on it. You have to really you have read up. You'll be surprised
Mhm.
the teachings that are out there that helps you to communicate, so that especially if you're the type of man that when you try to speak your feelings, you say, man, what's the use? It just gets worse and worse. Well, that's because we don't know how to communicate and nobody's valuing how you feel or anything, but just the way we relate or communicate just it causes those conversations to be hard because what you're saying is not being heard the right way, and the next thing you know, you're trying to address an offense, but the way you're addressing it, you're being offensive, and so there's this back and forth. But you got to, if you could learn for every brother, because I did it, so that's why I'm offering it. We can learn how to communicate how we feel, and that's how I had to learn for myself. The first part of communication is talking to yourself, this is how I feel. And then the first part of addressing offense is communicating to someone how you feel, owning how you felt. That's the hard part a brother does, because the first thing you want to do is, this is what you did to me, and that gets nowhere. The first part is, how did it make you feel? Beyond what they did, what did it feel like to you?
We have a hard
And
time
I
communicating hurt.
was that.
So we have a hard time communicating hurt because that indicates that we are vulnerable.
Yep.
And
And you
when we
can't
have
reconcile anything without doing that first.
mm-hmm.
Mm-mm.
One of the things I left out of my summary is that our core text for the group that we are encouraging all the brothers to go in and get a copy of is The Bait of Satan by John Bevere. I don't know if you're
Mm-hmm.
familiar with that book, but
Yes, sir.
it is our core text. I've walked through it many, many times, and I always tell everybody who, Dr. Scott and I sit down and we counsel with, that it was instrumental in me, taking that next step and
Mm-hmm.
understanding how I had been wounded and how I was potentially
Mm-hmm.
wounding others by harboring feelings of offense and so on and so forth. So certainly
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
been to that whole
Mm-hmm.
counseling phase too, and brothers, it's so worth it. It's so
Yeah.
worth
And, and we always say, hurt people hurt people. So what happens is there's brothers right now, you'll go and you'll learn how to communicate effectively, but the person that offended you didn't learn the skills you learned. So then now there's another skill you have to learn, which is release.
it. Mhm.
Once you speak your truth and they just ain't getting it, you don't have to own anything else. You have released it and you've communicated it, and you have to realize that some people just don't have, like you said, brother Jason, the EQ or the IQ to even handle it. So why are you engaging in someone that's not even there? They don't even speak the language of reconciliation. So just release it and move on.
And one of the other things we caution brothers about is that your decision to reconcile will not always meet with reciprocity.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to be willing to accept that you know what, you owned it, you owned your part
Mm-hmm.
in it, and that's all you're
Mm-hmm.
going to get. The
Yep.
goal is to cleanse your heart and move along so it's not holding you up.
Yep. That's exactly right. That is so true. And that's so much freedom when you
Oh man,
just,
it is.
yeah, and they could be just as nasty, but you realize that ain't even my issue no more.
Right. You did what you were
Yeah.
called to do, and you have been
Yes,
released, and that release is incredible.
yes, it is. It really is. It might make them even more mad, but listen, you got a smile that ain't contingent on what they think about you no more.
Right.
It's what's up. Yeah. Yep.
All right, so let me ask this next question, and I feel like God gave me these questions because y'all are, where the discussion is going is literally where my questions are lined up. So couple of things, Pastor Alvin, you talked about things that your father taught you, and even Jason, you kind of shared the value of that relationship. So when we talk about men not properly managing their feelings and thoughts, how do we then prevent the next generation of young men? I mean, I know you're a girl dad, but when you think about young men, how do we then, help them to not find themselves struggling to communicate and, having all these bottled up feelings?
Right. Go ahead, Brother Jason.
Okay, well, like I said, my father taught me how to be, pretty much stoic. And I took it to the next level. I wasn't stoic. I could be almost robotic. So while I knew as a teenager how much I cared and loved for my dad, we just didn't know how to communicate that to one another. So what he had passed on to me is, not a lack of affection, because I knew there was affection, but certainly verbally, that's not the way we engage. It was always mutual respect. It was always encouragement, because he is a very encouraging man. He always taught me to seek after anything I wanted to go after. But when it came to that emotional stuff, we pretty much, I was extremely limited. So basically, I would put out there to learn that on my own. And you get into relationships, and that can be a struggle when you are trying to, whether it's even in the corporate world, there is that EQ pops up, and you have to learn how to navigate what people are trying to communicate on multiple levels. You have to learn how to more really interpret what they are trying to put on the table, so that again you don't take that offense, because it's easy to interpret something as aggressive when it might just be demonstrative. It might just be someone who's very confident in their own skills who's saying something. And so I know I was deeply impacted by not learning those skills directly from him, so that I could be advanced on that EQ or that emotional level and being able to communicate. I mean, even when it got into, my dating life and so on and so forth, it affects everything across the entire spectrum. And so that you have to have enough willingness to go back and learn those things. And one thing I am is a constant learner, and I want to be as whole as I can be. So I'm willing to go back out there and learn how to communicate. And I had to take that back to him. And that was hard, because I wanted to open up that emotional side of our relationship. I didn't want us to go through the relationship. It's just, healthy mutual respect, father, son, prototypical, kind of relationship. I wanted more from it. And, the first time it didn't go over all that well. Yeah, I remember for a while I was telling him, hey, man, I love you. All right, bro, I'll let you later. And, it's like, okay, I'm pushing to open this up, but you ain't gonna not keep saying that you don't love me. I mean, I got to hear it from you, because, I'm pushing here. I'm putting myself out there. So that is definitely one of the impacts that it can have generationally if we don't go ahead and teach our children that. My kids, my sons, they never went through that. And I knew they were never going to have to. I wasn't going to allow that to happen, because I understand how much effort it took for me to make that transition and that shift. And I don't give it to everybody. But, it just, even in our little small family unit, I recognize how much effort it took. So I didn't want my sons to have to go through that. So I made sure I eliminated that. They knew from day one, we're going to talk on an emotional level. I'm going to know what's going on with you emotionally, as well as in your books and all that kind of stuff. I'm going to know what's going on in your world, period. What are you considering when you and your friends talking? I'm going to be nosy. I'm going to be in it. I want to know. And I want you, more importantly, to be able to communicate that stuff all back to me.
Absolutely. That's so good. I just got a note up here that my internet, am I glitching?
Fine to me, sir.
Okay.
Yeah.
Man, thank you, Roger. We were just sharing about your relationship with your dad. That was just touching, man. And I don't think people understand, especially brothers, we don't really understand our next generation. I mean, it is very, very important in shaping the next generation of brothers coming up. I just like you said, I think it takes modeling for us to just. My dad was the typical He could have been a stoic, could have been one of those unemotional, unaffectionate dads. He grew up without, his murder, so he was out of the house all the time, and he was like 7 brothers himself, and Brooke, or Flatbush. So it's one of those really hard type of life. But when he had us, he's like, I am committed to be a very active, loving, affectionate dad. My dad, and I used to see this with the Wayans brothers because I thought my dad was the only one that did it. He was, on our forehead and in our cheek as a man, just to be affectionate. And it was that type of modeling that I believe, opened up something in me. And even though I still got work to do when it comes to being a feeling man, but I think it opened up more of being in tune more with my feelings and being comfortable with that I'm now more comfortable than I would have been if he had not have been. So this point, it takes modeling, but for the brother that feels like, I never had it myself, so I don't know what to model. My God of giving you what you need, even if you're not, we say the father to the father, can transfer that part, that need, where you'll be doing it and not even a difference point in your life for it, but it's the Spirit of God that gives you that ability to give next generation what they need. My dad is a true testament of it. And so I just wanted to encourage, like, you feel like you're struggling being a feeling man and being in touch with your feelings. If you ask God to transform you, he will give you that ability and you can transfer it to generation.
Amen. I will also say this. I know you have 3 girls.
Yeah.
And it comes so much easier for the girls, at least in my experience. I have 1 little girl, and that bond is different than with the boys. Okay, but the transformation that you just spoke about is, I'll walk right up to my dad right now, kiss him on the cheek, kiss him on the forehead. I mean, that's the level of transformation that had to occur, and I can't tell you, as I hit 10, 11, that ain't happened.
Right. That's good.
Oh, is the next question me? We're deep in the conversation. Okay. So in Luke 17:1, Jesus tells the disciples, it is impossible that no offenses should come, but woe to him through whom they do come. So as we've talked about John Bevere and the bait of Satan, we have learned, and using this passage of scripture, Jesus assures us that we're going to be presented with opportunities to become offended. Okay. That our job is to know how to handle the offense when it comes. And John Bevere states in his book that esteem has a lot to do with offense. If someone's on your inner circle and they offend you, it hurts deeper than someone who is on the outer circle, who's just an acquaintance. So is it possible to manage the expectations of those we hold in high esteem, or for people who hold us in high esteem? Is it possible to manage those expectations so that we can try to manage the possibilities of how we offend them? So first of all, do you believe, is it possible to manage?
It's very possible to manage. I think the expectations is what opens us up to the, and you don't want to have this wall, like you said, up on everybody, where you don't give anybody a chance and you just but there's a way that you can relate to others without getting offended when they don't meet your expectations. And that's one of the things is have realistic expectations. The fact that some people are just human and will say something wrong out their mouth is an expectation. You should have an expectation to imperfect and just come to grips with that. You know what I mean? When they do, they did not disappoint your expectation. I mean, but still, yet that doesn't mean that now you overly protective so they don't hurt you. Just as imperfect as you are, and so your expectation is gotta. I'm going to give people the ability to be imperfect. I say that puts us in a very vulnerable place, but you're just as imperfect as they are, and God you, and they love your imperfections, and so the same way you get that tolerance from others, you should have that expectation of others. Now, of course, there are some extreme lines that you just expect people not to cross, and then when they cross those lines, you have to address it. But I think sometimes our expectations are way too much, way too unrealistic, that we have to really kind of bring them in and have more realistic expectation when it comes to people. It'll prevent a lot of offense.
So, Minister Cooper, you've been awfully quiet over there, sir. What do you think about that? Let me pose that to you as well, please.
Let me absorb, okay? But I would agree with Pastor Alvin. I think establishing or having a expectation, and then perhaps maybe establishing an expectation, but just being open to the reality that people are imperfect. And whenever we embrace that as a reality, whenever people don't meet that said expectation, it's like, well, you know what? You ain't perfect no way. So I can't be too disappointed because I knew it was a possibility. Now I might still get a little bothered, but it's a reality. So I definitely agree wholeheartedly with that. And I think if we learn to shape that expectation, it'll make it a whole lot easier for us to manage offense.
Yeah.
I think what I would add to that is, because everything both of you all said is absolutely, I agree with it, and it's so very true. I think it harkens back to our ability to communicate and communicate where those boundaries are, those healthy boundaries. So when people slide up to them, if we know how to communicate efficiently, we can tell them, hey, you are approaching that boundary, and I know you don't want to cross it. I know that's not what your intention is. I know that's not what you want to do. So let me help you recognize that you're approaching that boundary. And, effective communicators, they can do it. But those of us who haven't necessarily learned that effective communication don't know how to help people to see the boundaries a little bit better. So I think it all works together. I think that we all have to lower our expectations. And then we have to extend that grace, because we all live by grace. And so we have to continually extend it. Then, I think Eddie Murphy called Rick James habitual offender. We have to go ahead and address those habitual offenders that we know they're coming. So let's go ahead and be ready to communicate to the habitual offenders. Hey, I don't know if you mean to do this, but this is how you're making me feel when you step up to that boundary. I really don't want you to cross. So let's just work on that together.
Right.
I feel
That's
like,
example. I'm sorry, go ahead. Yeah, brother.
No, I was just gonna say, I feel like one of the reasons why we don't address offense is because of our fear of offending the person. So it's like, because they might misinterpret it. And so I ain't trying to, offend you. So some people will allow themselves to get hurt to avoid hurting someone else, in their mind, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah. I mean, we definitely, I've done that. Even as a pastor, there's a lot of times where taking hits, because I don't want to rub nobody else the wrong way. It is, there's something to speak to. You have to. Jesus looks to Peter and says, "Get behind me, Satan." I mean, times you got to speak up, even if it might cost somebody saying, "Hey, that offended me," and then y'all can. But the reality is, you cannot your proof and your feelings. I was saying earlier, this is the best example of having somebody in his circle like a Judas, this is so crazy the whole time. And he knows what Judas is capable of doing. He knows what Judas will do. Shows us how he can still roll with somebody that he knows has the potential of not just being imperfect, but is going to him. Now we got to study that.
Yeah, wow. I'm like, I need to go read some more that night because you put in that context. I was like, yeah, wow, wow.
We got, and but we find out that the reason why he rolls with them is because Judas has a function, or even Jesus's. I know what Judas is capable of. I'm keeping him in the group. I notice he dialogue with Judas. He ain't take him up on the mountain. He ain't do none of that with Judas, but Judas is still in the group. There's a where Judas is needed to accomplish my mission.
Mm-hmm.
So,
wow,
that right there is a study of in itself.
Yeah. Did you have any follow-up questions? I think that's an awesome place to kind of lead the brothers, thinking about that, man. That's good stuff.
That's good.
Yeah, wow, that's really good stuff. Okay, that's it. Did you have anything for us, sir? Any comments, questions, etc.? Man,
again, I enjoyed this. I really appreciate y'all for selecting me. Hopefully, in being empowered, I learned a lot. So thank y'all for letting me be a part. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you, sir. I was telling Cooper and LJ last week when Doc was presenting me with the idea for this group and who I'd get a chance to interact with. That's why I jumped in, because if the list hadn't been what the list was, I'd be like, nah, girl, I got enough on my plate right now. I just don't need nothing else. It's a push. But man, sit down with you jokers and have some good conversation about stuff that I know the men need to hear about. Yeah, that's an opportunity that I certainly did not want to miss. So I appreciate each one of y'all, because it's definitely a learning experience that I enjoy.
Praise God.
Amen. All right, sir. That's it. We ain't gonna keep you any longer. No, you got to travel this week. Whatever it is, enjoy it.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, I'm out. Yes.
Okay. I can tell it must be some sort of vacation. Enjoy yourself, sir.
Man, it's the year ever that I was able to go on vacation doing watch night. I'm a PK, so every watch night we in church. So I get to bring in the new year on vacation. Bless the Lord.
Set it on fire. Set it on fire. Have a great time, man. Get some rest and relax.
All right.
You certainly earned it.
Yeah, man. Take care.
All right, y'all.
Right.